as we are at the end of your age, wearing normally to bed you wear like underwear and a pad or tampon, etc. So if she's at the end of her period, she should still be.
Hey guys, the audio on the audio on this interview is very very bad. I'm going to play it, but if it gets too bad where it's like totally inaudible, then I'm gonna go ahead and skip it.
No, I'm saying after that though, like when you're not having sex and you're in bed, you have like underwear and a pad on, tampon, whatever. So you don't bleed in bed all the time or bleed your clothes. So normally you have some sort of feminine protection on if you're having sex. Is that fair?
And we normally put a towel
down. That's a lot.
We try to do that's for me. So we don't have to clean that up.
Is there anyone in here that can tell me if you guys can understand this? Because I absolutely cannot understand anything that either one of them is saying. Let me see. I'll play a little longer and see if it gets better or not. But I think it's this way throughout the whole thing. And I'm going to skip it if it's too bad. If you can't understand it, then there's no reason to play it because it's very long.
But we ended up getting everything.
Okay. So on Sunday, Jocelyn still coming home.
She couldn't get off of it. Dolly. So that's her phone, which is not responding.
She couldn't get a hold of Dolly to bring him home or what?
They had made kind of a loose arrangement. We only had Jackson at the time, so it's kind of a, for us, we're happy that he wants to do sleepover, but we really want to get him back and have enjoy the day with him. So she wanted to get him back as soon as possible. She didn't know what their plans were. She knew they were planning on going to Universal. She was worried that he was going to want to do that, and he wasn't going to come home until 5 or 6 or 7. And a couple days without seeing him, and then, school was starting, so she was a little bit
I tried
excited.
put it on closed caption, but it's not working.
That was it. We had the whole moment to ourselves, so we tried again. And as I said, the kind of quality experience that she needs, that's just that's who she is.
So you spent Sunday together. Did you go anywhere?
No, they went to. So she ultimately couldn't get a hold of them. So she just went over there. She got Jackson and his stuff. It was quarterly. It was Plankton and I think they went after that to Publix to get some food. They came back.
We'll be in recess for about 10 minutes.
There's no way we could ever. So moving on that is it we bought a house that we knew we probably would rent it just in really was of a location and just
So do you recall Sunday night about what time everybody goes to sleep since you're all
we
the
go to bed
same?
early actually. So 8:30 we're winding down. 9 o'clock lights are low. I think I took a shower at that time while they were getting into bed. I remember kissing them good night.
That was a fast day. We already made it through lunch. Sorry, guys, but I couldn't understand it, and there was no way I could listen 2 hours of that. Here we go. Oh, while we wait, hit that thumbs up for me, please. Thank you. Sorry, I had to skip through all of that. It was a lot. I told you it would be a lot.
And you are still under oath.
All right, before we began publishing his interview yesterday, we discussed neighborhood canvassing
Yes, sir.
and seeking out videos in the neighborhood
Yes, sir.
and seeking out videos along his path of travel in his car to the dog park, the Park of Americas and back.
Yes.
And we discussed somewhat some of the investigative subpoenas, but not all of them, I don't think. Were investigative subpoenas issued for banks where he or she or both held bank accounts,
Yes, sir.
or any of their business entities or trusts,
Yes, sir.
and any joint accounts,
Yes, sir.
and the life insurance policies that were just discussed at the end,
Yes, sir.
as well as State Farm mutual funds?
Yes, sir.
Did you get Shanti Tronnes's iCloud data from Apple
Yes.
via subpoena?
Yes, sir. Actually, through a search warrant.
All right. Subpoenas or search warrants are court orders. There's three
Yes,
different
sir.
ways, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this is in conjunction with the state attorney's office.
Correct.
Did you interview Mr. Tronnes's ex-wife up in Minnesota?
Yes.
Is it fair to say that this investigation went on for months prior to Mr. Tronnes, the defendant's arrest?
Yes.
In all of the evidence that was collected and gathered during this investigation, is it approximately 10,000 pages of documents?
At least.
And you see all the exhibits that have been entered into evidence today and this week?
Yes, sir.
Was there anything other than the defendant's statement to you and Detective Sharp that indicated that Shante Tronnes was alive past the steps that were shown to be taken by her phone on her iHealth application the night before at 11:19 p.m.?
Objection, Your Honor, lacks foundation.
You may answer.
There's nothing that indicates any sign of life past Monday night. Her phone call to her son at 8:23 and her phone moving in social media between 11 and 11:30 p.m. Past that, there's no sign of life.
No other questions?
Good afternoon, Detective.
Good afternoon, sir.
It's fair to say that a significant part of your work as law enforcement had involved aspects of domestic violence.
The 22 months I was involved with the grant position for the federal government, yes.
Okay, so that was a concentration of domestic violence.
Concentration because the city of Orlando had been designated as a high lethality
Right.
a city
You
for
received a
domestic
grant.
violence.
Sorry to speak over you. You received a grant. It was
The department received a grant. I was placed in the grant to work.
beyond that. You worked for like assault and battery, the division before going to homicide.
It's all in the same division. We worked domestic violence within assault and battery, but they had accepted the grant, so they wanted one detective on high lethality domestic violence only.
All right, we heard Detective McClellan's, speaking of your abilities and, such as a bit of a, having extensive experience in domestic violence. Fair to say?
Probably more so than other people at our agency, yes, sir.
Detective McClellan at the time wasn't part of the homicide division, correct?
Correct.
She was hoping to join,
She later did that summer.
so she was working with you, hoping to join, and she did later that summer.
Right, but I had no decision in her coming to homicide. That wouldn't be my call.
When you, let's go to April the 24th, when you first arrived at the scene, fire and EMT had already left.
Yes, sir.
Which officer initially commented on Mr. Tronnes's perceived odd emotional response or affect? Was it Marsh or Wilson?
On the phone, Officer Marsh.
So before you even got there and laid eyes on David or the scene, you had been told something about his emotional state.
I couldn't lay eyes on Mr. Tronnes. He had already been transported. But the call made to us by Officer Marsh indicated some concern.
And it was before you did a walk around of the crime scene.
We had just gotten the call.
Ultimately, upon your arrival, David went to the station voluntarily.
Yes.
He didn't drive himself, did he?
No, we asked him to come down and they drove him at 16:38. He arrived at 16:50 and he went to the restroom and was placed in the room at 16:54, just before 5 p.m.
All right, so around 5 p.m., he's settled into the room that we've been watching for the last close to 6 hours.
Yes, sir.
Initially, the first hour or so, he's placed in a chair that he's not visible on camera,
I don't think he was placed there. I think that's just where he sat.
and no one asked him to move to the chair where the camera could see him.
I don't believe so. They came into the room and started the CSI work. And eventually, I think they did ask him to sit there, or he did on his own. I'm not sure.
All right, well, we understand the importance of the camera in the room, correct?
Correct.
So somebody's out there monitoring from a screen, supposedly?
They can see him, yes.
Well, they couldn't see him because he was sitting in a chair. He wasn't visible, right?
Well, there's more than one angle.
So we
It's-
might have had another angle that we could have
It's,
seen. Mr.
yeah,
Tronnes?
it's certainly possible. There's supposed to be 2 cameras in every room.
He cooperated with the request of law enforcement?
As a whole? All of us? Is that what you're
I'm
asking?
saying upon arrival and dealing with the crime scene technician, whoever went in there to work with him and
He
Detective Montford?
absolutely volunteered to come down and cooperated with CSI Kane and with Detective Montford. Yes, sir.
Thank you. They photographed his clothed body at that point
Yes, sir.
and his clothing
After it was removed from him?
or on, I mean,
Yes.
close-ups of his clothing while it was on his body.
Sure. Yes.
They took buccal swabs of his cheek for DNA
Yes, sir.
and he complied with that request.
Yes, sir.
Took swabs of his hands,
Yes, sir.
fingernail clippings,
Yes, sir.
and then he sat around and waited for a good while, didn't he?
I think that process took about an hour and then, so about from 5 to 6:15, 6:20. And then we entered the room right around 9:14, 9:15.
All right. So, and during that time, he was mostly alone.
Yes, unless they checked on him. If the room went dark, because there is it on timer, officer would enter the room or he would wake up. But yeah, he would be alone unless he asked for something, unless they checked on him.
And you didn't go back and count up how many minutes of the time that he sat in that room that Mr. Tronnes looked to be asleep, did you?
I watched the entire thing, all 14 hours more than once. So I couldn't tell you when his head was down if he was actually asleep, but his head was down quite a bit.
You did comment at least once when I think when you came back in for the second portion of the interview that he, at that point, it was what, 2 or 3 in the morning?
It was 2:19 a.m. We had been out of the room for an hour and 50 minutes, just under 2 hours. And yes, I asked him if he had a chance to sleep, and he said yes.
But you commented he's got to be physically or mentally exhausted.
Mentally more so, drained, yeah.
He'd already given a timeline of how long he'd been awake that day.
Since about 6:45 to 7 in the morning.
You were at the scene when Mr. Tronnes first arrived at the police station, isn't that correct?
I was at the scene at that time, yes.
And you had a little bit of a delay in getting to Mr. Tronnes because you had a little bit of a gaffe or a communication error in the way that the notification went to Jackson Cooper's school, caused a complication with James Cooper because without you wanting it and before you knowing it, you had people at your crime scene.
Well, I wouldn't say that was the delay. Obviously, we had to go there. We had to observe and see what we had. We had to call the medical examiner. They had to respond. That was almost until 6. We didn't even leave and get back until 6:40. I still had to write the search warrant so my sergeant could get searchers in the house. That took an hour. So that was until 8. And in that process of doing our job, Mr. Cooper showed up with Jackson at the scene. He had to have his wife come get Jackson, so that took time. But by the time he got to the station, we were just submitting the search warrant. So I submitted the search warrant at 8:04. He's there. He's in the lobby waiting for us. And so we start talking to him at 8:10. As soon as the warrant was signed, we start talking to him. It was like simultaneous. And so it only delayed us talking to Mr. Tronnes by maybe an hour.
But voluntarily in this room, he sat there for over 4 hours waiting for you to enter to do your
From
question.
5 to 9:15, absolutely. Yes, he did.
He had on a paper suit.
Tyvek suit, yes.
There was a comment by Detective Montford in the interview, as well as yourself, about an effort to grab him clothes. Was that done?
Well, I wasn't going to leave the scene, and I'm not going to leave the room to go get him clothes. But ultimately, we ended up taking him home, so there wasn't a reason to bring him clothes.
Well, let's back up because
Okay.
your comment was during the first portion of the interview before you returned to 218 East Copeland. Isn't that correct? About getting him clothes?
Before I returned at 5 in the morning,
Yes.
yes, I said we would bring him clothes, but nothing's going to leave that scene till I see it. I hadn't seen it. I'd only been there briefly, but I hadn't had a chance to go back. And once we went back at 5 in the morning, I knew he was coming home.
There was no effort to get him clothes.
No, once we're bringing him home, he can change into whatever he'd like. But he had asked to come home, so I knew we were bringing him home. We just needed to go back to the scene and give us a few minutes to look at it because we hadn't been there all night.
Detective Sprague, you left David Tronnes initially at 12:20 something to go back to 218 East Copeland, did you not?
No. No,
were in-
we did not leave the station, no.
So after you left the room at 12, you didn't go back to the home?
At 12:31, no.
Okay, you just didn't re-enter the room for several hours.
It was an hour and 50 minutes.
He was eating water and crackers.
He was peanut butter crackers. I got him some Belvita wafers and water.
Isn't it true that you briefed the ME investigator Ralph Kalachi prior to doing the interview with Mr. Tronnes?
Tell me what you mean.
You gave him information to assist him to write his report, which he wrote before the end of his shift.
First of all, I didn't know they wrote reports until after this case. This was news to me. I gave him information. I'm not sure what you mean by that. I asked him for his assistance. He came to the scene, he provided those answers, and he left. I didn't even know they wrote reports.
Did you tell him that this was a domestic violence assault before even speaking to Mr. Tronnes?
That it was a domestic violence assault? No.
That it involved domestic violence?
No. I told him that the husband was the one who called us and that what his statements were to the 911 through the officers. No, I did not indicate who was responsible for her death. We didn't know.
You were suspicious, though, weren't you?
Of the story, of the inconsistencies in the water, yes, of course.
Isn't it true that you developed Mr. Tronnes as a person of interest or suspect from jump? That you didn't believe a word out of his mouth?
That's not true.
You didn't prejudge him for the lack of emotion?
No, I did not prejudge him for the lack of emotion. I would tell you, her ex-husband was just as much of a suspect as he was, but you have to be able to eliminate people, and you have to start with the person who called 911.
Once upon the crime scene and doing your walk around, you became concerned with some of the details you noted at the crime scene, correct?
I became concerned with some of the details I noted in the crime scene. As discussed, no water, no wet, those things, yes.
or no, detective.
I became very concerned with inconsistencies, yes.
All right, we'll go through them.
Okay.
Let's start with that. The lack of splashed water on the ground. That was a big one for you.
Okay, I want to be specific, sir. I don't want to say on the ground. We're going to say
On the bathroom floor.
on the bathroom floor, I will agree with, yes.
Okay, but the carpet was wet underneath where Shanti was found, right, on the mattress pad?
Where blood looked like it had been diluted or cleaned up, but nowhere else.
Or the soaking wet yellow towel that Mr. Tronnes described as wiping Shanti with?
Soaking wet yellow towel was under the mattress pad.
Could be responsible for the carpet being wet and the rust, such?
I'm not sure what
If
you
the
mean.
soaking wet towel is laid
Underneath
upon a
the mattress
carpet-
pad?
Yes.
If it was in the tub with her, I would imagine it would be wet. But how it got from the bathtub to where she was without getting water anywhere else is a mystery.
You took note of the state of the body, specifically the rigor, the light rigor,
The rigor and what else?
the minor rigor, the fact that minor rigor had set in. Didn't the ME investigator explain that to you?
I took note of the rigor the moment I saw her.
Scrapes on her knees,
The abrasions, yes,
the condition of her face.
absolutely.
You noticed a single earring on the nightstand,
A single what?
a single diamond earring on the nightstand.
Yes.
And what was the significance of that?
Looks like she removed it before bed and didn't get a chance to remove the other one
Because you believe that's when the attack occurred.
on the edge of the bed where the blood was found on the side rail. Yes.
So no blood on the headboard, no blood on the sheets, consistent with such a violent attack?
Oh, I think when we found the sheets, there was blood consistent with that attack. That's what we were looking for.
Well, let's talk about that because did you get a look at the sheets after they were examined and
Yes.
tested at the lab?
Well, before they were sent to the lab, yes.
Okay, and of the dozens of stains that were on the top sheet and the bottom sheet, how many of those had Shanti's DNA in it, either as sole or as a contributor?
One or two. Most of them were Mr. Tronnes.
Okay, so one or two tiny little spots of blood on those sheets. And you think that that was the result of a prolonged violent attack that started at 11:30 the night before, based upon a single earring on the nightstand?
Prolonged violent attack that started the night before. Never indicated it started the night before. I don't think it happened after he left. A prolonged violent attack. I think It started on the edge of the bed where the blood dripped down to those slats and then went to the carpet where she stayed for quite some time because it drained through the carpet and the mattress pad in 2 spots. But it started, I believe, yes, on the edge of that bed. I don't know that that's true, but I think it started there. And I think when she turned to take that earring out, she didn't see it coming because she didn't have any broken fingernails. She
So,
didn't get a chance. I don't think she saw it coming.
and I can appreciate the idea of putting these pieces together, but isn't this a bit of a stretch from basic circumstantial evidence? You have no reason to believe. Was there any blood under the bed, below the slats in the railing?
The blood under the bed was on the edge of those slats where it dripped down from the edge of the side rail.
Was there any bed on the rug under the bed?
Any blood on the rug under the bed? It would have been probably under the slats, and I don't believe there was.
You also noted that Shanti wasn't wearing a wedding ring,
Yes.
and that became a big deal to you.
Well, I didn't know she wore one until I asked him, and he said she did. She had a set on. And so we had to ask every witness about it because I didn't see it, and he said it was there.
All right, so, and you did begin the interview with David while the search was still being conducted at 218 East Copeland, isn't that correct?
The search wasn't being conducted until we told them to start. I called my sergeant or texted my sergeant at like 8:11 and said the search warrant had been signed by the judge, and we were in an interview with Mr. Cooper. So we were unavailable from that point, but we weren't there.
But you were communicating with the folks on scene completing the search, correct?
Once we broke at 219, yes.
Having them make certain observations for you with regards to the body, the condition of the clothes.
Mostly when the medical examiner was going to arrive, anything that they found that they thought was pertinent that would help us in the interview.
David did give you some information about the bed with regards to blood, correct?
Yes,
He discussed intercourse with his wife at the end of her menstrual cycle.
yes,
Isn't it true that you found feminine hygiene products used in the trash?
yes.
So despite being told about bloody sheets during the interview, and despite you suspecting this is where the attack occurred, you execute a search warrant on April the 24th, and you don't collect the sheets.
The which sheets? The sheets that didn't have blood on them? No,
Did you
they were.
collect any sheets?
I don't believe any sheets were collected because they didn't appear to be evidence at the time because there's no blood on them. There was no blood on any of the bedding, even the foam bed. We looked and looked. There was no blood. We couldn't see it.
Did you pull any of the sheets off the shelf that you've got so many photographs of?
I hadn't had a chance to look at his video yet, so it wasn't pertinent. The sheets on the shelf, I didn't notice that how would I know there's supposed to be 2 sets of sheets there
Detective,
until I saw the video a week before? There's one set of sheets. It's in a container. It's on the half shelf. Okay. But that's not pertinent to me. I don't even know why it's there or what relevance it is until I see the video in his phone.
What about the balled up sheets in the linen closet next to the Swiffer?
Appeared to be clean. We're looking for blood soaked sheets. Like we're seeing a lot of blood. Blood on the floor, blood in the bathroom, blood on her. We're looking for blood soaked sheets and blood soaked clothing. And we're not finding that. Those did not look blood soaked to us at all.
Did you pull them out and look at them?
I did not know.
Did you photograph them?
What
On April the 24th, did you look at them on April the 24th?
they're photographed in the closet. They're photographed in the closet.
Were they
I did
pulled
not
out
pull
and
them out.
examined?
By our searchers, I could not tell you that. I don't know.
Weren't you directing the search?
No, my sergeant was. I wasn't there, sir. My sergeant was in charge.
Did you explain to them your concerns over the your perceived odd comments about the period sex and them having intercourse at the end of her menstrual cycle?
Certainly, I was not able to go into all of that with the searchers on scene. All I said to them was, he's saying there's blood on the bed everywhere. Look on the bed. There's blood on the bed everywhere. And they said they did. They said they did. And then we did a final walkthrough at 5 o'clock in the morning. We didn't see it either. We just didn't take the bed apart, and we probably should have.
You made comment that you thought the bed was made in an unusual manner.
The bed looked really, really, really made in haste.
So there, another clue that something might have happened on this bed.
Correct. That's why they took it apart. That's why they took the mattresses off. They took everything off. The slats, both mattresses,
Detective.
both foams, those sheets, they found nothing. The blanket, they found nothing.
Detective, how many search warrants did you execute in that property?
3.
Okay, so on April the 24th, was any effort made to preserve the sheets of the bed?
Effort made to preserve the sheets of the bed. We did not understand where the blood could have gone. We didn't see it, so no.
Okay, let me stop you there. What about, isn't it true that on April the 24th, that suspected blood was seen on the edge of the slats that were located on the floor under the bed?
I asked those to be collected on April 24th. I
And they
asked
weren't.
both of them.
And they were not.
weren't. And when I found that out, we went back.
And so let's stick with search warrant number 1 though, because
Mhm.
we're talking about April the 24th here. So you've got blood on slats that belong to the bed.
That are under the bed on the floor. They weren't connected to the other slats.
They belong to this bed. They're a piece of the bed. There are other slats that make up this bed that are still attached.
Yeah, these had broken away and they were on the floor and they had tinged blood on them. My very first comment to CSI Crosby before we even left to go write the search warrant, that looks like blood to me. Figure out how it got there.
So you already knew that there was blood on the bed.
Under the bed, on those
And
slats.
then you got information from David Tronnes about bloody sheets that
No.
you thought was odd. and
He said there
suspicious.
was blood everywhere because I didn't even ask him on the bed. I said, "Are you trying to tell me there's blood somewhere?" He said, "There's blood everywhere." I said, "Where?" On the mattress, the bedspread, on the sheets, on the side of the bed. It's everywhere. And I thought, well, that's odd from the end of a menstrual cycle and she's not even wearing, didn't look like she was even wearing underclothes.
Going back again, you're at the station interviewing Mr. Tronnes, who's giving you information about bloody sheets, right?
He
Bloody
said
sheets and blood on the bed.
there's blood everywhere.
And he told you that they swapped them out and told you what day they did and how they dealt with both the mattress pad and the sheets. Isn't that true? That they stripped the bed on Monday. They stripped the whole thing.
They left the bloody bed apparently all of Saturday and Sunday and stripped it on Monday after Jackson went to school. That's what he said.
So in seeing the sheets and with the 30-something stains on them, and knowing that there was only a couple of spots that belonged to Shanti, you still are of the opinion that there was a violent attack on that bed because the evidence is supportive of that?
I am of the opinion that something happened on the edge of that bed where everything that she owns or everything that she would take off is on that nightstand. And then we've got blood that has drained down that side rail and been cleaned on the top. Then we've got an L bracket with blood behind it, and then blood drips down underneath it. And it's right in the center, and then it drips down underneath it, and then it hits the tinge on the ends of those slats.
You don't-
Something happened at that event.
You don't know
Something
when that
happened there.
blood, you don't
It does
know,
not transfer from her body because
You
she's not
don't-
close enough.
you don't know when that blood was deposited there, do you?
No,
You don't know if it happened at a completely different location. When
What do you mean?
when that blood came to be on that bed, that the bed could have been in the main house.
I think that's a stretch. You've got the slats that are under the bed that look apparent to me fresh, absolutely fresh blood. And that's what I said to CSI Crosby. That is fresh blood. Figure out how it got there. That is fresh blood.
But yet you didn't.
I'm not in charge of the CSIs. When I learned that we didn't have the slats, we went back.
Let's continue to talk about 421. You're not giving any guidance to these folks of what areas you think are important that should be documented, searched, or
I was,
taken as
I'm
evidence?
not there. I'm not there. I can't be in two places at once.
You did a walk around the scene, correct?
We
before you
went back at 5 o'clock in the morning and we walked with the CSIs.
Okay. And at that point, did you have any input that was helpful to them? And did you go back
Yes.
and see if the slats had been
I
collected?
gave them instruction and we went to make the death notification. I told them exactly what we walked it. We went and I told them exactly what I wanted. And then we went outside, we went down to the garage, we walked the property and we went to make the death notification.
It's an 800 square foot apartment, correct?
I don't have any idea.
Isn't it true that you didn't search the nightstand on April the 24th?
I don't know if I searched it or if someone else searched it.
Okay, well, if it was searched, wouldn't there be photographs of it as such?
Not necessarily, no. No, but when Barb and I went back, we absolutely went through that because we were looking for her ring.
And when you're talking about it, was that on April the 30th or
Oh,
on May the
no,
24th?
it was April 24th. As soon as he said it, that the ring was on her finger, and I knew it wasn't. That was my sole focus when we went back.
So it's your testimony that you went back and you looked in that nightstand and you searched through that for the ring
I was looking for her ring.
and you located ring boxes.
I ring boxes that were empty, and then the reason I keyed in on that tiny costume jewelry is because it looked like a wedding band, and it wasn't. It ended up being like pliable.
Detective, CSI was still at the scene with you on 424 when you were doing this?
Correct.
And no one thought it important to your investigation to take photographs of this search?
They took a lot of photographs of that search.
You believe that they took photographs on 424 of the nightstand and specifically those jewelry boxes?
Oh, I don't know if they did that or not. I searched the entire loft for that. That's why we were there for 2 hours. I was looking for the ring. I know Detective Sharp was looking at a lot of the finances. She was looking at a lot of the notepads. I was looking for the ring.
If you're looking for the ring and you find jewelry, you found a diamond stud earring, correct?
We have pictures of the diamond stud earring. Yes.
You open up a drawer right next to the bed of the that's the nightstand, correct?
With no jewelry.
There wasn't a ring in that drawer?
This is different. I'm looking for a diamond ring, a diamond wedding ring and a diamond engagement ring. I'm not looking for costume jewelry. That's not what I was looking for.
You found 2 empty boxes though,
Correct.
which had helpful information to your investigation, did it not?
Not to my knowledge on 424. I didn't learn about H&Q till we interviewed Sam. When Samantha told us that that's where the ring was purchased, then I was like, oh, I saw that. I saw that ring box. It was empty. It said H&Q, but I didn't know that till we interviewed Sam. I didn't even know Sam existed.
So you're looking for for a ring, and you find empty ring boxes, but you don't consider them significant enough to photograph them.
They were completely insignificant. I'm looking for her wedding set because he said it's on her finger, and I knew it wasn't.
Let's go ahead. The interview, you were asking a lot of questions about his memory of his encounter with Shanti after he entered the apartment that afternoon, right?
Yes.
And at some point, you even stop asking him about his memory and you start asking him to guess about what happened. Isn't that true?
You'd have to be more specific, so I don't know what you mean.
You ask him to guess how she suffered those injuries.
Oh, I asked him what he thought her cause of death was.
And when he started to explain what he thought it was and what he was guessing, or maybe even hoping it was, you started to tear him apart because you didn't like his answer. Isn't that correct?
No, we witnessed it. I didn't tear him apart.
You didn't go from treating him kind to calling him a liar?
That's evidence rule.
On 424, you didn't search the main house.
The main house, meaning the one under construction?
The main house.
No, we did not.
3,500 square feet of construction.
Sir, I didn't even think it was safe to walk in there.
It's an
But-
active construction site.
Active construction site. I wanted photographs of it, so I had Stacy do that on 4:30, but I wasn't even sure we were supposed to be in there.
Ladders, tools. It was actively under construction, was it not?
I don't know if it was actively under construction. No, I wouldn't say. I mean, it was under construction, but actively, like people showing up every day, we never saw that.
Did you see a ladder in the main house
On the first day, no.
on the 30th?
On the 30th, yes, we went in.
You didn't process the main house for prints or DNA,
In the construction site?
correct?
No, absolutely not.
You didn't process any of the doors for suspected blood prints or signs of forced entry?
We didn't see blood, no. I didn't have any indication that what happened to Shanti in an upstairs loft had anything to do with the interior of that construction site. There was no indication that would lead us in there.
Are you-
No blood trail, there was no testimony, there was nothing that would lead us in there.
Isn't it true that it's an access point to the garage apartment through the hatch that you can get across to the
Now,
top door?
the door was locked. The upstairs door was locked to the loft.
It's your memory.
I checked it as soon as I went upstairs. That door was locked. I even unlocked it and walked out there.
So if we had testimony that the top door to the outside deck was unlocked, that would be counter to your memory?
I walked upstairs, and the first thing after I checked the lock downstairs is I checked that door. And then before I left in the morning at between 5 and 7, I walked out there on the roof and looked at the gargoyles, walked the entire roof looking for evidence in case anything was thrown out there.
And isn't it true that there is a access point that you can get from the main house to the garage apartment without going up the front
Yes,
steps?
yes, but I did not go in there, but I saw it, yes.
Can that door to the loft be locked from the inside and pulled shut
From the inside or the outside?
inside?
I unlocked it and walked out there.
Thank you.
I checked the lock. It was locked, and then I unlocked it and walked on the roof.
On 424, the bathtub had a peculiar stain. Is that fair to say?
The bathtub to me looked like it had a blood stain, a diluted blood stain.
Well, when you say, and that's what I'm referring to, when we talk about this rose colored stain in the tub, when you're looking at the photographs with the enhancements before and after the enhancements, it becomes clear that there's a detection of blood that was pooled and diluted with water and became like almost a coating of the tub surface itself, right? Once it drained.
The ring appeared that that's probably how high the water was.
And it was pretty consistent all the way around the tub, pretty uniform.
Yes,
So the entire white tub was stained with this rose color, right?
yes,
Bathroom's pretty small.
yes.
So if someone is coming in from the apartment into the bathroom door, what you're seeing is the tub in front of you, correct?
Yes,
And the toilet's to your left?
and the vanity,
and
yes.
Vanity, right. But if there's an individual who's before you facing away, they're covering up a good bit of this tub if they're in the position that Mr. Tronnes describes to you as being like back to him, back legs to him, and hunched over, correct?
Submerged at an angle, face down, taking up pretty much most of the tub.
And we heard submerged. He says the water was running and a little bit inconsistent, you say, on the speed that the water's running.
From the trickle that he heard to the where he said the dial was, yes.
So what he heard, what he thought he heard versus what he was able to visibly confirm when he went in.
Correct.
And the body was wet.
The what?
Shanti's body was wet.
No.
Her hair was wet.
Damp, maybe.
So, all right, so damp. It
And
wasn't
it was
dry.
full of blood.
It wasn't dry, was
It
it?
was messy. I think the medical examiner said it was damp, and there was some blood in it.
And what about the clothing? That was wet and damp too, wasn't it?
He said her top was damp. I watched him do it. His top, he did it, and I watched him do it. And he said the top was damp, and the shorts were a little more wet. Her skin was not.
So in the vein of a long-haired person laying over into some bit of water and being pulled out of a tub, that if the water is running down their hair, that it would pool on their shirt and perhaps on the shorts.
From her hair?
Or from being in the water. I mean, if part of her body's in the water,
Should she have been soaking wet? In my opinion, yes.
well, let's not talk about completely submerged to the definition of like how much of her body was in there, because he gave some things that you thought were inconsistent with how much water and how much of her was in the water. Isn't that correct?
No, I think he straightened that out. That's why we went over it. I mean, details matter, right? So the truth is in the details. And I think he explained what part of her was out and what part of her was in, what part of her was bent, where her legs were, where he saw blood. I think he explained that fairly well. With which part of her legs were bent and stiff, and everything was stiff and cold.
David described blood on the ledge of the tub and hair in the drain,
Yes.
and that was there.
He said he saw her hair floating, and then he heard the tub draining when he pulled her out. So whether or not he went back to see her hair in the drain, I don't know, but he saw the hair floating. And then when he pulled her out, he heard it draining as he was getting her out of the tub.
hearing a tub drain is usually when it's just about out of water, right?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
I think you can hear it as soon as you flip the switch.
We discussed that there was not extensive blood on the bed,
We didn't find any blood until we went back and disassembled it.
and other than the blood, which you considered fresh on the slats that weren't collected on the 24th, you found no blood underneath the bed.
Correct.
You found no cleaning products and bloody rags consistent with the cleanup of a crime scene.
Well, it was trash day that morning.
You found no towels other than the white towel from the bathroom that had a trace amount of blood on it,
Correct, and the yellow one.
and the yellow one, which had blood on it as well.
Gold, I'm sorry.
Forgive my color blindness, but
Yeah, I think he said gold. I don't want to misinterpret him.
towels and evidence and such.
Okay.
But there's also photographs on it. You were able to see that the towel was there
Yes,
and that it was wet
yes,
and that it had blood on it.
yes.
Let's talk about your interview. You actually entered the room, I said about 9:17. Is that what you're?
9:15.
9:15. And it's your testimony at that point, you didn't consider David a suspect.
Did not. I just needed to straighten out the inconsistencies. The officers told us what they had observed, what their thought process was, what they were thinking. And my job is, I'm obviously a lot more trained than them. So my job is to just find out what happened in more detail from him.
All right. And you talked about some of the methods that you used in order to gain his confidence and get him to open up to you. Those were somewhat evident on your.
I think the what I talked about was later, with the minimizing and all of that was later. In the beginning, I'm just going to ask him what happened. I just need to know what happened and follow the evidence.
So you go from asking questions to attempts at manipulating.
Manipulating him to try and get him to say something that isn't true? No, absolutely not. No, I think we challenged him on the evidence that did not support his assertion of what occurred. And, that is what we're supposed to do. That's my job. I have to challenge the evidence that doesn't make sense to his story, and it's his story. So we challenged him.
So, and his story, and something you took an amazing amount of exception to, was the fact that he slept in the garage.
I don't think I took an amazing amount of exception to that. Did I find it odd for newlyweds to sleep in a hot garage with the dogs on a couch when there's a perfectly good couch upstairs or the king size bed? We had questions about that. He explained their thinking, and I wear a CPAP, so I'm familiar. I understand what he was saying, but even when Jackson's not there, he's not sleeping with her. So
That's not exactly what he told you, right? He told you that he did sleep with her on Saturday night and into the Sunday.
and before that, it had been some time. So I mean,
Well,
and that's
before that, there had been a period where Shanti was not feeling well. Isn't that true?
well, that was February and March. I mean, that was 6 weeks earlier.
Okay,
but
now
he-
we're into April.
Right, the end of April, and it had been some time.
So
He's
you've got
sleeping with the dogs in the garage. I thought it was odd.
construction in the main house,
Not inhabitable.
right? But that wasn't the case the entire time they were married, was it?
The entire time they were married, yes. The entire time I lived there, no.
Okay, the entire time that they lived there, for a good portion of time, they lived in the main house.
Yes. They,
It was
when
only
they-
about 16 months that they were living in the garage apartment.
I think it was more like just over 2 years. They kept the kitchen, but they were living back there for over 2 years. They kept the kitchen, I think, until December.
You suspected an unhappy marriage,
Yes.
though
Or a stressful marriage.
the presence of an 8-year-old in an 800 square foot apartment didn't sound like justification maybe for sleeping downstairs sometimes.
Well, Jackson's only there 2 or 3 days a week. I
It's
mean,
not his biological child.
it's not his biological child. They are in the same room. I'll grant you that, but he's with his dad quite a bit.
So the days that he is there for David to sleep downstairs, that wouldn't be unusual to you.
I think if he would have explained that and said, I'm not comfortable sleeping with his mother in front of him, and when he's here, I'm going to sleep downstairs because I'm not comfortable with that, but that wasn't what he said.
Did you speak to Shanti's college friend?
2 of them.
Anybody anybody tell you that Shanti snored like a trucker and that it bothered David
Her dad,
or dad?
her stepdad.
So you became aware of that.
They lived, David and Shanti lived with them for 2 years, and he slept with her in the bed the entire 2 years while she snored like a trucker. And Mr. Dow could hear it down at his bedroom. But at the time, didn't bother David because I guess they just met. So he stayed with her those entire 2 years while she snored like a trucker.
And maybe there weren't alternative sleeping arrangements in the parents' house for him.
I don't have any idea.
Okay. So with that, would you be able to confirm for us that Shanti was not CPAP compliant and she didn't wear it?
There was one under the bed, but everyone told us she didn't wear it.
So when push comes to shove, after a married couple is married for a little bit, if one wants sleep, sleeping in a separate room is a real problem for you with regards to the state of a relationship?
I don't think so. If the main house was done and he sleeps in another bedroom, I don't think that much. I don't think that much about it if it's a sleep thing. But being down in the garage with no air conditioning, on a couch with a couple of dogs in the kennel, I just thought that would be very uncomfortable
He
and
did
intentional. And it wasn't his, he wasn't sent down there. He chose.
It was a big property.
What do you mean?
I mean, the yard had a big yard,
He could have slept out by the pool, I guess, in the cabana. It's a huge place.
had an outdoor living space that he could
Beautiful.
take advantage of.
That what?
That he could take advantage of the outdoor living space throughout the
He could have
evening.
slept there, I guess, yeah.
Well, I'm not talking about for sleeping. I'm
Oh,
talking
I'm sorry.
about for access to, additional living space.
I thought we were still on the sleeping. Okay, so yeah, beautiful property, great, beautiful cabana, nice pool area, large property.
But there's no evidence that he spent all of his time away from Jackson and Shanti. He ate meals with them, didn't he?
I guess he saw them for a few hours in the evenings, like when she got done working, when Jackson got home, either until he got picked up by Jim or until they went to bed. They went to bed, I guess, fairly early from what he explained.
Well, they had an 8-year-old that was sharing the room with them, didn't they?
Yes.
So wouldn't that explain an early bedtime for all? And maybe explain why David wanted to be downstairs and out of the room?
Because Shanti and him went to bed early. Is that what you're suggesting?
Because Shanti and Jackson
Went to bed early?
super early.
Yeah. So if he wants to stay awake, I mean, he didn't say that, but yeah, I guess it's possible.
Okay, thanks. You were bothered by the fact that Shanti had a job and David didn't.
Bothered by it? No. He explained that he was semi-retired.
Okay, so you,
I mean, he
you
doesn't.
made
he
note
doesn't.
of it though.
Well, if he doesn't need to work, he doesn't need to work. I mean, that's beneficial to him and the family, I guess.
Didn't you essentially look at him like he was the pool boy?
Did I look at him like the pool boy,
Yeah,
or did
didn't
I
you consider
suggest to him that she
didn't-
was treating him that way?
Right,
I
exactly.
didn't look at him as the pool boy. No, sir.
You didn't look at it and suggest that the relationship was so odd and that he was marginalized to taking care of the dogs and the pool and he lived in the garage.
I made a suggestion to him that that might have been how she was treating him, and that he might have been taking exception to how she was treating him. But he didn't say that she was treating him that way.
You took exception to the fact that he spent his days dealing with the construction, the dogs, the pool, and the house, and they didn't have a quote unquote real job.
That he didn't have a quote unquote real job.
Right.
I didn't take exception to it. I did point out that that's what he did, that his job was, I guess, the house. He didn't help with Jackson. That's why she hired a nanny. He didn't do a lot of the stuff that she needed. That's why she had Sam. He handled the exterior of the home every day.
So it's your testimony that he did not have a good relationship with Jackson?
My testimony is that whatever she needed done with Jackson or her business, she hired out. He was there, he was home, but she hired that out.
And so you don't believe that David ever assisted with the care for Jackson at all?
From what I learned from witnesses, he did when she went in the
Your Honor,
hospital.
All's for your say.
Okay.
You took note and you questioned him regarding the home renovation, specifically the time and scope of the project.
Objection, no question pending.
Overruled.
Ask again, sir.
Isn't it true that you questioned him regarding the home renovation, specifically the time and scope of the project?
Yeah, absolutely. We asked him all about the renovation, and he offered quite a bit.
You suspected frustration and aggravation and tension in the relationship because of it?
Because of the length of time they were out of the main house, how long it was taking, how many contractors had been let go. and how long they'd been living like that.
Fair to say that you suspected that this was their money pit?
Someone did refer to it as that. I can't remember who, but yeah, someone did refer to it as that. I didn't use those words, but someone did.
Now, David did give you an account of his day. Isn't that true?
Yes, we started on, I believe, Friday.
Right. And let's go to the day, though, of the incident. You were able to verify some of the things that he told you about prior to the day of
Yes, and obviously she was live, so yes,
now it was a trip to Publix
yes.
and some of the,
Pizza Hut, Publix.
and what about some of the things that David alluded to with doing yard work around the property and maybe locating some tools and stuff when you scanned the bushes and stuff?
Explain what your question is.
Did you locate like knife or tools that were consistent with David's explanation of his
We
chores?
saw
for
the
the day?
orange handled iridescent knife in the front plant bed by the driveway. And so I asked, it was just left there. So I asked him about it and he said that's where he left it.
So you were able to confirm that he was truthful about the
I'm not sure what day he was working on that particular plant bed, but when I asked him why it was there, he said he probably forgot to put it back.
There was no evidence his knife was used in a crime.
Correct. There's nothing on it. It was just laying there. I didn't even know if it belonged to them, but it was theirs and there was nothing on it. But I asked him about it, what he does during the day.
There was no sharp trauma discovered on Shanti, though. Consistent with
No. Once we went to autopsy, I mean, obviously we're interviewing him before we go to autopsy, but we didn't know what that facial injury would be once we got there.
David told you he went for a walk with the dogs after seeing Shanti downstairs smoking a cigarette.
No, he said he went for a walk by himself and then he came back and walked the dogs long enough for them to use the restroom, then came back, worked around the house for a little bit, then put the dogs in the RAV4 and drove to Park of Americas.
Isn't it true that he told you that he walked the dogs and then he went for a walk by himself around the lakes? And he walked up to Orange, around Lafayette, Cherokee, Davis, and another lake
No.
before returning on.
No, he corrected himself. He said he went for a walk alone and it was Orange to Lucerne and then Cherokee, Davis, one other one.
You agree the video will speak best for itself?
Correct.
Isn't it true that while he was out walking alone that he bumped into one of the neighbors?
Not to my knowledge.
Jacqueline Spence, didn't see him walking?
I'm sorry?
Jacqueline Spence? Yeah, Jacqueline Spence.
He didn't run into one of the neighbors. That would be incorrect.
Did a neighbor see him walking when she was on her way home from Publix?
Not at the time he said he was walking. He would have already been home. He would have already left and gone to the dog park. She said when she saw him at 1150 on Miller by the Horsehead House, he was behind her home on Miller, and he would have already told us that he had already both loaded the dogs and gone to the dog park. So that was inconsistent.
You were holding him pretty hard to the times that he was giving you. You're recording them as if they're gospel when he was sitting there in an interview room. Isn't that true?
His words are his words. My job is to verify it.
Was the man wearing a watch?
I don't know.
Uh,
I didn't ask Miss Spence if he
was
was
he
wearing
under a
one.
lot of pressure?
Objection calls for speculation in the mind of another.
Was there a traumatic experience that happened that day?
In his home?
Yes.
I would say so.
So, and he had been sitting at a police station waiting for you to speak to you for how many hours?
From 5 to 9:15.
When he came back, he told you that he walked around the house and pool and did landscaping for a while before taking the dogs to the dog park.
He did a few things around the house. He said his walk was at least an hour,
Let's go back to
about
Jacqueline.
an hour, hour and 40 minutes, or hour and 20 minutes.
Back to Jacqueline Spence. When she did have an encounter with him, she didn't note any blood or injuries or anything like that on David?
Just different clothes. He had light colored clothes on. He had different clothes on when we made contact with him.
And when did you interview Jacqueline Spence?
It would have been Thursday or Friday, the 26th or 27th.
And isn't it true that she was somewhat confused and vague about the days and times that she might have seen him
Not at all.
with dog or without dog?
She didn't remember seeing the dog. She didn't remember seeing a cell phone. She didn't remember him carrying anything. She absolutely knew it was him, and she absolutely knew what day it was. And then I went to Publix to verify she was correct on her timeline.
David told you that he then took the dogs to Park of Americas?
Park of Americas on Andes.
All right. And in fact, there are cameras at that park, aren't there?
I went there 3 times. Yes, sir.
But you weren't able to collect any of the footage to corroborate David's timeline.
Unfortunately, the city of Orlando does have access to those cameras. Our video analyst has access to those cameras. He checked immediately. It was one of the first things I did. And they weren't operational. They're very overt cameras, but they weren't operational. So I went back 3 different times, including a week later at the time that he said he was there. And I walked the park 3 separate times to the area where he said he was. And I showed his picture and asked everybody if they saw him. But, I can't say that they were there that day, but I just went around and asked just to try and verify that he was there.
No fault of Mr. Tronnes is that the cameras were not functional.
No fault of his whatsoever, but they weren't operational.
You found it unbelievable that he left the property for hours on April the 24th.
Found it convenient.
Or tragic that he wasn't there to protect his wife.
Well, I think it became increasingly more irrelevant that he wasn't there because I don't believe that she was alive when he left.
You found it unbelievable that David didn't call or text Shanti during the day.
Unbelievable? No, I just asked. No, I just asked if they had communication, because if they had communication, his cell tower would put him there and that would verify what he's telling us because I didn't have cameras.
Not true. That was par, that they didn't communicate during the day because Shanti didn't like to be disturbed.
That was what?
That was the norm.
That they didn't text or call each other ever?
Yes, because Shanti didn't like to be disturbed during the day. So
Oh,
David,
he said she didn't like to be disturbed during the day. Yes, he did say that, but she did text people. She texted other people.
for work, right?
Perhaps, or for picking up stuff at the grocery store like Sam did.
Samantha Adams confirmed with you that Shanti didn't like to be disturbed during the day.
I don't know that she said that she didn't like to be disturbed because she's up there doing homework with her son. So Jackson's up there, he's playing video games. They're redoing his reading. They're doing his words for the day. I mean, he's up there. So I don't know that would have been disturbing to her, but she did text people during the day. She texted Sam during the day.
Work related or because Sam was the nanny.
Right. I mean, if she needed him to come home and pick up Jackson that day, she could have texted him. But my point is just not the communication being a problem. It's just if you communicate while you're at the dog park, then your phone's going to put you at the dog park at the time that you say that you're there. That was the only reason I asked.
If you used your phone,
If you use your phone. So I didn't just ask about Shanti.
Right.
I said, did anyone call you? Did you text anyone? Did you get on and check your email? Did you get on social media? Did you do anything at all with your phone? And he said he put it in his cooler and left it there.
and you found that convenient as well.
I found it as a dead end. If he tells us he's there and I can't verify it with his cell phone records or with cameras, then how do I verify what his alibi is? And I can't, but it became increasingly not as important as it was in the beginning.
Because pretty quickly you came to develop him as the only suspect.
No, not pretty quickly at all. We didn't arrest him for 127 days. It was not quick at all.
You're aware that Shanti had a dental issue on April the 24th.
According to him, she bit into a taco and broke her molar.
You confirmed she had a broken tooth
Yes, with the ME.
and the fact that she had scheduled an emergency appointment with the dentist
Yes,
that she didn't show up to.
that she didn't make it to, yeah.
And you also took note that she didn't respond to an 6:58 a.m. non-urgent work text. Isn't that true?
You're characterizing something as non-urgent. I don't know that was the case. 6:58 work text would not have mattered to me had Mr. Conley not suggested that he expected an answer pretty quickly.
Did he tell
That-
you that it wasn't urgent?
I don't recall if he said it was or wasn't urgent, but he became very, very, very concerned that he did not get a response from her within the first few minutes when he called me, because he called me. I didn't know who he even existed. He reached out to me because that text was never read.
When he found out that Shanti was deceased, he felt it important to let you know that he hadn't received a response from a very early text message in the day because it could be pertinent.
Well, that was why he reached out. But prior to knowing she was deceased, he was Googling her because he thought something had happened to her because he never got a response. So he was already worried about her.
His worry aside, I mean, this missed text message is the reason that you set your time of death where you do. Isn't that true?
I didn't set a time of death. I'm looking at her cell phone. He says she comes downstairs 3 times. That phone never takes steps. If she's up working at 4 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in the morning, as people suggested she is, and that phone never takes steps, or that phone never takes stairs. So that means she didn't pick up her cell phone. This is a businesswoman who works all night, sometimes 4 o'clock in the morning. She doesn't pick up her phone from 11:30 the night before, 11 o'clock the night before, all night long and all the next day. She never picks up her phone. And she's running a business that people say she answers like this. She's super responsive. That became important when I heard that.
Okay. So we're talking about from 11:30 at night to 6 something in the morning. This is the time frame you're talking about that she was unresponsive and it was alarming and peculiar to you.
It would be until 6:58.
Okay. And a text message pops up on the screen. Is it possible that somebody could pick up a phone, read it, and put it right back down without activating and still have access to the information? On
In
an iPhone?
And the phone not registering movement? I
Sure.
don't know the answer to that. That would have been a question for the previous person who testified.
Okay, so the fact that a step wasn't registered on it, you know, if the phone wouldn't register a step based upon a movement like that, then she could have very well been privy to it. And because of her toothache, she didn't care to deal with it right then.
I don't, so she didn't read it the entire day and didn't respond to her colleague?
Um,
Is that what you're suggesting?
No, I'm asking a question and I'd like you to just be responsive to it. The question is, what inference is drawn from the time of the text message if she can pick it up and read it and put it back down without it registering a step on the health app?
I don't know if picking it up and reading it, if she would disable a lock, those aren't questions. I'm not an expert on that. So if she has to put her face on it to open it to read it, I don't know that her phone would even allow her to read the text. I don't know that she would have to open up her face. If she opens it with her face or her thumb, then yes, that would register. Absolutely, that's registered in the phone, 100%.
Detective, you're the
So-
lead detective in this case, aren't you?
I need to finish. So if she looked at that text and decided not to respond to him the entire day, that would be inconsistent with her performance previous to every other day that she owned that business.
No one's saying she didn't respond the entire day.
It was never read, sir.
You don't know that it wasn't read. The phone doesn't show it to be read. Isn't that true?
Sustained argumentative.
Still on 424 in the interviewing room. You find out at some point during the interview that the CSI Tech Kane did not photograph Mr. Tronnes' body without his shirt on, correct?
I asked him. I didn't know if he did or not. That's why I asked him.
Because you didn't communicate with the technician either?
Well, I asked him to clip the nails and get a buckle swab. Yes.
You didn't ask him to take photographs?
Well, of course he was taking photographs. I didn't know that he didn't take photographs without his tank top on.
Would that require a special request normally?
Possibly. Different CSIs do different things.
Okay, so
I think if he did photograph an injury on his hand, I think if he would have seen an injury, maybe he would have photographed it. But I hadn't had a chance to view his body.
you asked Mr. Tronnes to review the paper jumpsuit, correct?
To do what?
To remove the paper jumpsuit so you could observe his chest, arms, and back.
I asked him if he was okay with it, if I could view his chest, arms, and back. And then he started to unzip it.
And did he show you his chest, arms, and back?
He absolutely did.
Okay. Did you observe some sores and bug bites and some wounds on his back?
Yes.
Did you photograph them?
No, nothing. There was nothing concerning to me that he had injuries sustained from a fight or any sort of cat scratching or nail scratching. There was nothing on his neck, his chest, his arms, nothing that I felt needed to be photographed. I didn't observe anything but his sores and his skin disorder.
And possibly an explanation as to how the little bits of blood end up on sheets in the bed? His blood particularly?
We didn't have the sheets. I didn't know the blood was there.
Okay.
We just met the man.
In hindsight.
In hindsight, what?
Hindsight. In documenting the wounds on his back, wouldn't it help wouldn't it help the jury to understand how his blood comes to be deposited like that on a top sheet and a fitted sheet?
It's possible, I guess, if he sleeps in the bed sometimes, yeah.
Isn't it evidence that he slept in the bed?
Yes.
And you interviewed him. We watched it for several hours until you take a break sometime around 12:30 a.m. on April the 25th now.
12:31 in the morning, yes.
You had some administrative duties to take care of, but you did not return back to 218 Copeland.
Correct.
And we talked about Detective McClellan being in training. Were you aware that CSI Crosby's assistant, CSI Taylor, was in training as well?
Yes.
So of the four of you at the crime scene documenting this, two people were in training.
Yes. Two people, I wouldn't say Detective McClellan was in training. She was in our violent crimes unit.
In
But
training to be a homicide.
she wanted to come to homicide, so she asked to attend this. She was working with myself and other detectives when she was available, but she was in a violent crimes unit. She was not an inexperienced detective, and she had quite a bit of experience.
You leave David alone in the room for another hour and 50 minutes till 2:20 a.m., some 9 hours after he arrives at OPD, mostly alone.
We entered at 2:19, and he would have been alone to sleep, or if he needed to go use the restroom or get anything, he would have asked the officer.
And again, you don't know how much sleep he got.
I don't. I just asked him if he slept, and he said yes.
He said a little.
A little. Yeah.
He's still wearing the paper suit,
Correct.
still just water and crackers,
Correct. What did he ask for? He asked me for peanut butter crackers. That's what I got him.
sitting in a windowless room,
Yes.
sitting in a cushionless chair.
Cushionless chair. Yes. Yes, we all were. It's not comfortable.
Well, you were in there for a lot less time, weren't you?
About 6 hours. Yeah.
How many hours was David in that room?
Just shy of 14.
During the interview, David acknowledged that Shanti was stiff or in rigor upon him first touching her and attempting to remove her from the bathtub. Isn't that true?
He said she was very stiff. He said her leg was bent. It was stiff. Her arm was stiff, and her jaw was stiff when he tried to get CPR.
So for someone who's never come in touch with somebody before, that leads you to believe that there's some form of rigor that's beginning, correct?
What it led me to believe is if you're in the tub and you're in full or partial or full rigor and your leg is bent, then why is your leg not bent when we get there and see her body? And if her arms are down at their sides, then how does he drag her face down with her hands like this? How does he break rigor? Because he couldn't get her mouth open to give her CPR, but he got her arms from her sides down up like this to drag her upside down, which means he had to break rigor. And I don't think that's possible because I have handled many decedents in rigor.
Detective McClellan, David has no medical training.
Detective McClellan or Detective
Sorry,
Sprague?
Detective Sprague, excuse me. Pardon me, it's late and I'm tired too.
I'm missing an appointment, but go ahead.
So in the world of experience and expertise, he's not an expert and didn't know what rigor was and wasn't able to explain it to you and how it came.
He used the word stiff. We use the word rigor. So like when he's doing the CPR compressions and he says it doesn't rebound, he's saying it's stiff. When he tries CPR, he's saying it's stiff on her jaw. When he says her leg is bent, he's saying she's stiff. When he pulls her out, he's saying she's stiff. But she's in a completely different position when we find her.
To what degree and to what extent, if there was an arm in rigor, wasn't there?
There was an arm like this in rigor,
Okay.
but
and
not
what-
like this when he's dragging her upside down. How does that happen?
well, in the world of there was a leg slightly in rigor that you observed as well?
No, her knees were raised up in rigor. He says her leg was bent at the knee. How does that get straight when we get to her?
Well, let me ask you, you asked David to demonstrate on you how that happened, correct?
When he was dragging her this direction, I asked him to do it.
Right?
And then he said that he pulled her out because he couldn't do it. Said he couldn't do this.
Right.
So because her arm was down at her side. So he had to go under her arm, under her bicep, under her shoulder to pull her out of the tub.
Correct.
onto the floor with her head toward the door.
Yeah.
But then he has to flip her over.
This would be somewhat dead weight,
That's what he said,
slippery wet.
if she's actually wet. But then he has to break her arm rigger to get her head like that, hands like this,
And
and then face her down and then drag her into the other room
you
and
keep
then
saying
skin her knees.
you keep saying broken rigor. Is it possible he was just mistaken as to the extent of the rigor and didn't understand what he was talking about?
If he did this right before we got there,
Wow.
within 4.5, 6 minutes to call, 4.5 minutes later. So he broke rigor. He straightened her leg and he straightened her arms in the midst of a crisis.
He did not break rigor because the arm was still in rigor. You don't know what he was describing it, how it was bent. You didn't have him describe how the arm was bent. You didn't have him describe how the leg was
I
bent.
absolutely did. And the best evidence is that video.
Great, thank you. He told you that the water was running at a trickle at first.
For trickle at first and then halfway.
That he
partially
heard it.
full,
He
partially
heard it as a trickle, but saw it to be running
Saw it to be running halfway.
and turned it off as
Turned
he-
it off.
All right, but the shower was not on.
Hold on. Just make sure that we breathe in between so the court reporter can get everyone's words.
He recalled seeing the water with the diluted blood, rose-colored water.
That's how he described it. Yes, sir.
He described the best he could the condition and position he found her in.
I'm sorry?
He described to the best he could the condition and position he found her in.
He described it in great detail at our request. He did great.
And isn't it true that while you asked for a demonstration, Detective McClellan didn't ask for a demonstration, didn't ask him to show physically with his own body what Shanti was doing, but used this little model on the table?
In the tub. Then when they used the water bottle, they were describing her positioning in the tub.
And that's easy to tell what's going on that table from the camera view?
As far as what happened between him and Detective McClellan,
As far as what he was demonstrating, you believe that that's clearly presented in that video?
I don't understand what you're asking me, sir.
Objection, best evidence.
Same.
Didn't he describe her as prone, draped over the edge of the tub with the head down in the tub at one point?
To an officer?
Yes.
When Officer Wilson asked him if she was clothed, he changed her position from in the tub to out of the tub with just her head in the tub when he asked him if she was clothed. Then her body was not in the tub,
You
just her
weren't-
head was in the tub.
You weren't,
That did change, and they did tell me that.
you weren't present for that conversation.
That's why he wrote a statement.
And wasn't it simply clarifying how much of her was in the tub? And he was eavesdropping on a conversation that David was having with the chaplain.
Eavesdropping? Well, he's supposed to be there. He's an officer, and they called the chaplain for him, but he did hear that, and he noted the inconsistency with her being in the tub clothed, which perked his interest, and then changing the position from her being in the tub soaking wet to just her head and her torso and not her body. Her body was then outside the tub. They noted that inconsistency to me, and then they stopped asking him questions at that point.
Being partially in the tub would be consistent with her clothes and her hair and the rest just being slightly damp and not soaking wet. Isn't that true?
No, because if her body wasn't in the tub, then how did her shorts get wet? It changed.
Gravity? How about the yellow towel she was laying on?
That wasn't
How
near
about the
her.
mattress pad?
No, the yellow towel was underneath the mattress pad, sir.
And it was pretty wet, wasn't it? And a mattress pad's like a sponge,
I didn't touch the towel because I left and wrote the search warrant.
and you didn't touch Shanti Cooper either, did you?
I did not. I just observed her. I had Ralph Kalachi touch her because it's his jurisdiction, not ours.
So his testimony regarding the condition of her clothes, body, and hair would be more reliable.
What he told me on scene and what he indicated in this trial would be more consistent because he did it.
Okay, did you read his report?
Yes. Once I realized they actually wrote them on Saturday, the Saturday after this occurred.
David described the difficulty he had removing Shanti from the tub.
Yes.
And given his size and given her size, you found this unbelievable as well.
I felt at him at 6'2", 190, and him being allegedly never been happier in his life and in love, he would have scooped her up like a superhero, but he said he couldn't.
Isn't it true that he told you during the interview that when he pulled her out, that water did not splash onto the floor?
the video would be the best evidence of that, that he got her out of the tub and she landed on the floor. So I think we would surmise that water would be on the floor because he rolled her out of the tub and she landed on the floor, head toward the door. And so water should have been everywhere because she was wet, allegedly.
Did he tell you during the interview that when he pulled her out of the tub, that water did not splash on the floor?
I don't recall that, sir.
We should rely upon the video again.
Absolutely.
Fair to say the second portion of the interview was more aggressive than the first?
Probably the very end.
Okay. It's about now 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. You guys are rolling into another hour and a half of interrogation after a long, long day.
Yes, it was from 2:19 until about 4:56.
Ultimately, David wasn't arrested at that point, was he?
No, sir.
But the interview cuts off, I think, with our viewing of it. I think we stopped it somewhere,
3 something?
right? That wasn't when the interview ended, though, is it?
No.
How much longer did you speak to him?
Till 4:56.
So almost to 5 a.m.
Correct.
So 12 hours, from the time that he originally came to the station, correct?
I'm sorry, we didn't interview him for 12 hours.
No,
We
he got to
interviewed
the
him for
station.
5 hours and 53 minutes.
I said the time he got to the station, 12 hours from the
Oh, I
time
thought
he
you
got
said
to
the time he
station.
got. Okay, now I'm with you. From the time he got to the station until then would have been 12 hours, and then we brought him home at 7:09.
12 hours in that room, water crackers, unknown amount of sleep.
Correct.
And it was another 2 hours before you actually drove him home from the station.
I didn't drive him home, but I had him driven home by Officer McNutt, yes.
Officers drove him home.
Officers drove him home. And we met him outside and we released the home to him, which is why we didn't take any of the cash.
So we talked about the fact that on April the 24th into the morning hours of April the 25th, he sat at the station and voluntarily complied with the requests
Correct.
and left the station a free man at 7 a.m.
Just before 7, about 6:55, they took him out of the room
You
And they
released the
drove him
home to him?
and then they drove him home
You released the home to him, yes?
in
or
his
no?
front yard, yes.
She's just expounding upon it, trying to dial it back. Sorry, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you. When he was released, there were no restrictions regarding the home or the property inside of it?
Correct.
And isn't it true that David returned to the property and lived there for several days before moving to his mother's residence?
I don't know the answer to that.
Weren't you surveilling the property?
Not until Friday.
And at which point there was another search warrant executed on April the 30th of 2018, correct?
It was submitted Sunday night on the 29th and approved Sunday night, and we executed it on Monday, the 30th.
At that point, the sheets were still there?
Which set of sheets?
All the sheets that you saw
Yeah.
originally?
Yes.
But it was a month later, on May the 24th, that you execute this third search warrant.
Correct.
And at this point, you still don't know, you still think you're missing something.
I still think we missed blood on the bed.
You don't know where it started and when it happened,
Where what started?
this attack?
Uh, Somewhere between the shower and the side of the bed and the floor. But where the initial blow to her face or head, the side of her head or her cheek or the eyes, I don't know where it first started. But if it started, there should have been blood spatter, I thought, or something that would indicate a starting point because we had drainage, but not a starting point. If it was in the shower, we wouldn't know because it was diluted. It could have started in the shower, but we didn't know because it was diluted. I still felt we were missing blood on the bed. Just based on listening to his interview, I just felt we were missing blood on the bed.
Process the shower the first day because you see the blood ring on the base of the tub, correct?
I asked them to use a reagent. Yes,
What about on the wall itself,
they did. They did. Yeah,
right?
they did.
So at that point, and do you know the difference between cast off blood and blood spatter?
Yes, but once blood spatter is diluted with water, you're not going to know if it's cast off blood or expirated blood from being hit with the nose and the mouth. Once it's diluted with water, the pattern is gone. It no longer tells the same story.
And the stains on the walls of the bathtub?
All diluted.
Isn't it true that when enhanced, that some were darker than others?
I don't know that I can speak to that. That would be more of a CSI question.
When you were searching the property, did you locate a poker bag? And I'll go back to, you could say the 24th of April, the 30th of April, or the 24th of May. Did you locate a poker bag with cash in it inside of Shanti's closet?
No, we didn't learn about the poker bag from Sam until after we released the house on the 30th, and we interviewed her at 4:33 on Monday, the 30th. That's when she mentioned that with the $400 or $500 in cash. We did look for it. I believe Detective McClellan and I, one of us looked for it on the 24th, just to back up what Sam was saying. We had no idea what she was talking about. I don't know what a poker bag looks like, and we didn't find it.
Did you get a description from her or any assistance from
Yeah.
her in finding it?
No, I'm just her description that she gave us.
You never
but
followed up with her.
No, we looked for it. We just couldn't find it.
So
We
it's
just
missing.
looked in the closet for something that had something that you could put money in, but we never found it. But she didn't say it was absolutely there. She said that that was a routine when she made deposits from Shanti's business, that she might ask her to get a cash advance or cash from the deposit, and that she would put it there. But she only saw her do it once. So she didn't know that was something she did all the time.
What about clothing upstairs? There's how many closets?
2.
Men's clothes in one of the closets?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So evidence that David kept his property up there and released up there to get
Oh,
drafts and stuff?
there was a ton in the garage as well. I mean, on there is you get stuff in both places.
This is a laundry room too, right?
What is?
The garage area?
No, it is not. The laundry dryer, the washer was in the driveway, and the dryer was in the back.
At what point did you test the washer dryer for the presence of blood?
I asked the CSIs to do that, I believe, on the 30th.
Did they find any?
No, and that was something that happened in another case of mine, so I asked them to swab it because it had been fruitful in another case after something had been laundered.
In fact, there was a 4th search warrant executed some 4 months later at a different location, wasn't there?
Are you talking about at his mother's house?
Correct?
That would have been on August 29th, the day he was arrested.
All right. So 4 months after the 520, or I'm sorry, 4 months after the 424
4 months later.
incident. Thank you. And David was living at that house at this point?
Appeared to be, yes.
And you know that because you found some personal belongings of his in one of the bedrooms,
Yeah, a lot of his personal belongings, yes.
including Shanti's ring.
Yes.
Was the ring reported stolen?
No,
There was no insurance claim placed on this ring.
I don't know that they had insurance on the ring.
David had assets, didn't he?
What do you mean?
And he wasn't cash poor, was he?
No,
What was the value of the ring?
about 15,000, 11 to 15,000.
How much cash did David have on hand?
Him specifically, or I know the combined income or the combined assets
Let's
was
start
about,
with him. How about him specifically?
I don't recall, about maybe 130, 150,000.
That's all you believe that David had?
I don't recall. I know she had 300 or 400,000, but combined is what I remember, and it was about 798,000.
And what about the value of the home?
He paid 607.5, I believe.
What about retirement policies and such?
I don't know.
You made a big deal about the location of this ring because you felt that you've been searching for it for 127 days, even though it hadn't been reported missing.
It was pried off her cold, dead hand. Yes, I was very concerned about it.
Says who?
She was wearing it the day before. She wore it every day.
Says who?
The evidence in my case.
And these people that you spoke with, they were present with Shanti at her wake-up routine and her bedtime routine and her shower routine?
I was told she never took it off. And even he said it was on her hands. He told us it was on her hand.
You thought it was on her hands? That's what he said to you?
No, he told us it was on her hand.
Interruption. Lee, Trace approach.
You didn't detect any injury to her ring finger to suggest that a ring was pried off her finger?
No,
After a body passes, it typically bloats.
I didn't notice bloating in her hands and her toes at all, no.
You made a big deal about locating a passport in the bag with the ring and some cash. Isn't that true?
With the ring, the cash was in a Ray-Ban sunglasses case, and his passport was there, but I don't think it was in the suitcase with the ring, no.
Isn't it true that the passport expired in 2007?
I don't know if it did or didn't. I mean,
Look at it.
we took a photograph of it, but I don't know that I paid attention to when it expired.
By
But
this
there
time-
were rolls of cash in that sunglasses
How
bag.
much cash?
I don't know.
So, I mean, not a pile of cash that you're expecting. Any airline tickets? Any airline tickets located with the cash and passport?
No, and it was really irrelevant. He has money at his disposal, so
So this wasn't suggestion of sign of flight or anything of the kind.
he had 4 months to flee. He didn't flee.
While you were still trying to figure out where it happened and why it happened, by this time you were pretty fixed on who you believe committed the offense.
I followed the evidence. It's not my job to make of something fit that doesn't fit. You follow the evidence. I teach homicide investigation, sir. You follow the evidence. You eliminate people along the way. I could never eliminate him, and all of the evidence led to him.
You were able to confirm what David explained to you about the life insurance policies?
It was 350,000. He thought it was 250. Hers was 350,000.
And wasn't his actually $1.5 million and not $1 million?
I thought it was $1 million, but it could be $1.5 million.
But you were able to confirm that he had cash and assets.
Both of them did, yes.
He didn't sell the ring and he didn't destroy it.
Correct.
Photographs and looking at David's hands and bodies, they didn't show any signs of being involved in a prolonged violent attack, did they?
No, she didn't have any defensive wounds, and he didn't have any injuries.
What about swelling or bruising on his hands and knuckles consistent with punching somebody?
Not that we saw, not that day, no.
You didn't locate any bloody clothes belonging to David?
No,
You didn't find blood in the washer? We already talked about that.
correct?
And you didn't locate a weapon?
I don't know that one was used.
Talk about the neighborhood and canvassing the area and speaking to the neighbors and family and friends. Did you learn of any issues with homeless people in the Delaney Park neighborhood?
Specifically what?
Vagrancy, loitering, and hanging out around the neighborhood?
Vagrancy, loitering, and hanging out. No, most people said that it was a very safe neighborhood, very pleasant place to live, and they didn't have any issues with homeless people.
Did you have a contact with the homeless person that you were directed to that resembled Woody Harrelson?
I was directed to Mr. David Rogers, that everyone said looked like Ed Harris or Woody Harrelson. That
And
was
why
it
did they
was-
ask you to speak to him?
It was mentioned to Billy Lane. Billy Lane was telling the neighbors, asking the neighbors about him, so I found him.
Because there was a homeless person that hung out in the neighborhood a lot.
No, it was one person a few streets to the south that mentioned it to Billy Lane, that they had seen him, and he mentioned it to everyone else in the neighborhood who called me.
And you were able to locate the man?
I didn't find him. The Midnight Patrol officers found him, but it took a while.
And what did they do to eliminate him as a suspect?
They called me and I interviewed him at like 2 something in the morning.
And talk to me about that interview. How'd that go? What did you do? What did you
Specifically?
do to verify what he told you?
Oh, I asked him about himself, how long he'd been in Orlando, if he has any issues with going to jail for any reason, if he has any contacts with law enforcement, is he a thief? Has he ever been arrested for anything violent? And then I walked through the streets. I showed him a map, asked him what streets he normally hangs out on, sleeps on, where his routine is. And then I showed him a picture of the front of the house where the dumpster was. Asked him if he'd ever seen that dumpster, that huge blue dumpster in front of that house. He said no. He thought that he had walked on Copeland, and then he corrected himself and said, no, I've never walked on Copeland. I only walk on Miller and Orange. Verified his whereabouts. I asked him,
You said he was able to verify his whereabouts?
No, is where he hangs out, like where he sleeps, where he eats. It's between Orange and Miller, he said.
This is self-reporting.
This is him, I'm interviewing him. So then I showed him a picture of both Shanti and Mr. Tronnes. Said he didn't recognize either one of them. I asked him if he ever had any reason to ever be at that home where the blue dumpster was. He said no. I asked him if there was any indication that his prints or DNA would be at that house or inside that residence or on her body. And he said absolutely not. Then I asked him if he killed her. And he said no.
That was the end of the inquiry.
Yes. Yeah, and there was nothing found in the home that was foreign to anyone.
Okay. What about the location to ORMC? Isn't it true that there's significant mental health services provided within a short walk from that home at 218 East Copeland?
I can't answer significant mental health services. The neighbors did tell us on occasion they would see people walking back and forth that might have been released from the hospital, doctors that would walk back and forth that parked in their neighborhood, nurses that walked back and forth that parked in their neighborhood because they didn't want to park in the garage. But yes, that there would be people walking through, but no one that caused them concern.
Let's talk about the construction site. You know that the project has been going on for some time.
Almost really since they moved in, yeah.
Tell me about the list that you put together of all the contractors that have been on site.
From, that was provided to me, I believe, from Keith Ory.
And isn't it true that Keith Ory wasn't involved in the project until recently?
No, he got involved in 2017.
Okay. And tell me about the list. Who did you contact off that list?
I don't recall how many people I contacted off the list. I know they were all Keith Ory's subs. He pretty much knew where they were because he pulled them off of the project in February. So he told us, you know, they were his subs. He gave us the list. He kind of knew where they were because they were his subs, but they had not been at that property since probably Valentine's Day, right around Valentine's Day. So obviously we asked if they had any issues with the contractors, and there wasn't anything that
Were you aware of any fee dispute?
just between him and Keith Ory and Mr. Tronnes.
And what about the show going on to zombie house flipping? Were you aware of that?
I was aware that they were approved for the show.
Were you aware that it caused a delay in the project and everyone had to take a couple months time out?
No, that was a voluntary delay. Mr. Ory asked them if they wanted the opportunity. They had to stop construction in February in order to be on the show so they could show something being demolished. And the only thing left to be demolished was the second level. So they had to stop in order to be on the show so they could demolish that second floor.
And this was forced upon them. I'm saying that this was like a quid pro quo. If you wanted to be on our show, there was going to be a timeout and a couple of month delay.
They asked them, and they agreed that the trade outs might be worth being on the show.
Did you find out if there frustrated anybody who had been planning or relying upon that work for February and March?
Say that again?
Did you touch base with the contractors and find out if any of them were put off by the delay because they expected and needed this income in February and March?
If that had been said to me, then I probably would have caused some concern, but there appeared to be no issues whatsoever. They moved the subs from that project to another.
We talked about the fact that you are, can I have one moment, please, Judge? Did you ask and I'm sorry, I don't want to refer to him as Woody Harrelson. I just don't have my notes in front of me.
It's David Rogers.
David Rogers. Did you ask David Rogers if he has a cell phone?
I don't recall if I did or didn't.
So you don't know.
Well, actually, I think I did. I don't think he has one.
What about the construction workers? Did you get their cell phone numbers?
The contractors? The subs?
Contractors or the subcontractors?
If they were provided to us from Keith Ory, then I had them. I don't recall.
Did you check any of their phone records or do any, geo fence warrants?
The geofence around the house seems like we had a geofence. I don't recall if I submitted that. There was no evidence there. The getting just kind of random people's phone records is illegal, so I absolutely did not do that.
We talked about how you stopped the interview at 4:55, but Mr. Tronnes sat there for another 2 hours.
Yeah, 4:56 is when we exited the room. And then they got him at 6:55 and we took him home, or Officer McNutt took him home at 7:09 a.m.
Never made any admissions.
As to harming her?
Correct.
Correct.
And he left 7 a.m. A free man?
Yes, sir.
One moment. Thank you.
Hey, redirect?
Yes, ma'am. Is it important to know as many facts as possible before you interview a suspect?
It would be nice. Yes. It's very important.
And so walking through the scene prior to speaking to Mr. Tronnes was important?
Absolutely.
And the defendant, Mr. Tronnes, was the 911 caller, was he not?
Yes.
So are there reasons why there is a delay before interviewing the defendant?
Yes. You have to learn as much as you can learn before you walk into an interview cold.
During your cross-examination, you were asked if you were suspicious of the defendant. You did not arrest him that morning on April 25th after interviewing him, did you?
No, I did not.
Did you believe that there were inconsistencies with his statement and what the physical evidence at that point had been leading to you?
Absolutely. We had significant concerns.
Despite that, you let him walk away for 127 days. Is that
Yes. Yes.
And in fact, when a private investigator, Billy Lane, had been suggesting homeless person theory, did you follow up on that?
Yes.
And you described that during cross. We're not going to go through that again, but is that accurate?
Yes.
And you mentioned you go where the evidence leads you during cross-examination.
Yes.
There was no DNA found other than the defendant's, the decedent's, and Jackson Cooper, the child's DNA in that home, correct?
Correct.
There were no latent fingerprints lifted anywhere except for the defendant's and the decedent's?
Correct.
Now, you'd mentioned the bed railing on the side of the bed towards where Dr. Tronnes, the decedent, was located.
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, in a moment, can I publish from States 10? Ten, 1-0. Showing you image 39 on States 10. Is this the area of the wooden part of the bed frame that you testified to on cross-examination as being showing signs of being wiped down above the metal L bracket?
Yes, sir.
And what we see here was ultimately swabbed and sent to the FDLE, dripping below the metal L bracket.
Yes, sir.
And you were asked about whether or not the blood went down to the carpet in that area. Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the amount of carpet and carpet padding that was removed from the residence?
Yes, sir.
And whether or not that extended to underneath the bed frame?
Yes, sir.
Judge, I'm gonna object. This is approach.
Turning now to BO for identification, 59 in evidence. Fifty-nine, 59.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Permission to publish from 59 in evidence, BO identification.
You may.
In image 11 on this exhibit, you were present for this luminescing with the chemicals of the bed rail?
Yes, I asked them to do it.
And is this fairly and accurately depict what was behind the metal L bracket as well as on the wood beneath where there was diluted blood?
We covered up the actual blood with the paper and the tape, and then we sprayed the part that was, that had no blood to look for luminescing above it.
So there were 3 areas that I want to talk about in the upstairs loft. One is this bed rail area and the 3 slats. The second is the area around the decedent, 2 separate areas with discoloration, and then the bathtub.
Okay.
Of these 3 areas, were any of them not showing signs of dilution or cleaning?
No.
And you went and recovered sheets with Stacy Monroe in Lakeland, Florida on April 19th of 2019.
Yes, sir.
So the 4th piece of evidence from the upstairs that had signs of blood was actually taken from the scene by a private investigator.
Correct.
Again, when you went to the scene on your first call out, there were no sheets on the ground by the couch where the defendant later in the interview said he got the mattress padding from.
Nothing there.
And is that where he said they had taken all the bedding from the bed when Jackson Cooper went to school on Monday?
They had put it all there, yes.
And at any point, did he tell you that they actually laundered those items?
The sheets?
Yes,
The sheets, yes.
but not the mattress padding?
Not the mattress pad.
During his descriptions of how he found the decedent, Shante Tronnes, did he state the left side of her upper body was submerged in the bathtub?
The left side, yes.
Motion to publish from 68 in evidence, BR.
May.
Image 48. If her left side is submerged and her right side is not submerged, that would mean her right arm was above her torso and above her body in the tub.
It would have looked just like this in the tub, sitting up in the air.
Right. Did he describe her right arm being straight up out of the tub in the air like that?
No, he described it down at her side and he reached under her bicep.
You mentioned breaking rigor. Once rigor is broken, does it stay broken?
Objection, lacks foundation.
Jane?
For the record, I would say the door was open, but thank you. All right. And he stated to you anything about we were never more in love
Yes,
more than once?
yes,
Did he state that he was going to take her to her dentist appointment for her cracked tooth?
no,
Did he state that he checked on her throughout the day to see how her tooth was feeling?
not at all.
You had a discussion about the 6:58 a.m. text from a coworker or client.
Client, yeah.
Um, did the defendant tell you how many times that he saw the decedent smoking a cigarette that morning?
At least twice,
2 different times?
yes.
About how far apart and about what times?
7:15 to 7:30, she came back down again, and then came back down a third time around 9:30.
That text remained unreplied to.
Unread, unreplied to.
And a value of a home when it's purchased for $588,000 or $600,000 in cash, does that home carry the same value when it's being held up by the stucco on its sides and has nothing inside?
Objection, Your Honor, lacks foundation.
Hurled.
Not at all. In its current condition, no, not at all.
No further redirect. Thank you.
Anything further from this witness?
Detective, you're not aware of what the value of the home was at 2018 when you approached the property, do you?
When I walked up to the property, no.
Or even now?
What its current value is 5 years later?
Do you know now what the value was in 2018 and the condition that the home was in?
No, not precise dollar amount. They just thought they got a good deal.
Thank you.
May this witness be excused from subpoena?
We would like her to remain under subpoena.
Thank you. You may step down. You are still under subpoena. State?
One moment.
Will the attorneys approach? Go ahead and rest for the evening. Remind you not to talk with anyone about this case, not let anyone say anything to you or in your presence about the case. If anyone attempts, tell them you're on the jury trying the case, ask them to stop. If he or she persists, leave them at once, immediately report the matter to the court deputy. I remind you also that you're not to talk about this case with each other or form any definite or fixed opinions on the merits of the case until you've heard all the evidence, the argument by the lawyers, and the instructions on the law given by myself. And as a reminder, you're not to do any research of your own, whether through television, newspapers, computers, any other means, whether that's here, at home, anywhere else. We'll be in recess until 10:15 tomorrow. 10:15. Again, try to be here a couple minutes early so we can get started. I think that's my best guess of when we'll be ready. So let's say 10:15, and you can follow the deputy out.
Okay, so don't forget about the audio in the beginning. I played it and I'm going to leave it there so you can hear it and see why I skipped it. So it's a very short day. Tomorrow I will play day 5, which I believe is the end. They do have a verdict. It is, and he was found.
State you've provided your most recent proposals of jury instructions to the defense. Is that right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Right. And I would anticipate, obviously, we're going to be going through those tomorrow also. So if the defense can have reviewed them, if you, both state and defense can have as many agreements as they have prior to tomorrow. And we'll be in recess. Anything further this evening, state? Defense? We'll be in recess until, aim for like 9:15. It might be a little bit later before we get started, but somewhere around there. 9:15. Exactly.
Okay, back to what I was saying.
9:15.
Tomorrow,
And
I
we'll be in
think all I'm going to
recess.
play, of course, I'm going to play is closing arguments and the verdict. Of course, not deliberations. They did reach a verdict yesterday. I know what it is. You may know what it is, but I'm going to wait till we watch it tomorrow. So please hit that thumbs up for me, and I'll see you tomorrow.